September 12, 1958. Gold Star Studios, Hollywood. 17-year-old Ritchie Valens was sitting in the corner of the recording studio, nervously holding sheet music for a song he had written but was terrified to record. La Bamba, based on a traditional Mexican folk song, felt too authentically Mexican for what he believed American audiences would accept from a rock and roll star. That's when Doris Day, who was using the same studio to record tracks for her upcoming album, heard the young musician playing the melody quietly on his guitar and made a decision that would not only save one of the greatest songs in American music history, but would also give a frightened teenager the courage to embrace his heritage instead of hiding from it. What happened during their conversation that afternoon would make Ritchie Valens a legend and prove that some of the most important moments in music history happen when experienced artists convince young ones that authenticity is more powerful than assimilation. Ritchie Valens had been struggling with his identity as a Mexican-American performer in an industry that seemed to prefer its ethnic artists to downplay their heritage. Born Richard Stephen Valenzuela, he had already shortened his name to sound more mainstream American, and his hits Come On Let's Go and Donna had established him as a rising rock and roll star. Ritchie was incredibly talented but constantly worried about being accepted, recalled his producer Bob Keane. The music industry in 1958 wasn't particularly welcoming to performers who seemed too foreign or ethnic. The pressure to assimilate was enormous. Record executives, radio programmers, and booking agents often advised ethnic performers to minimize their cultural backgrounds to appeal to white mainstream audiences. The conventional wisdom was that American teenagers wanted rock and roll that sounded American, explained music historian Richie Unterberger. Anything that seemed too obviously Mexican, Italian, or from any other ethnic tradition was considered commercially risky. Ritchie had written La Bamba months earlier, inspired by the traditional Mexican wedding song he had heard at family gatherings throughout his childhood. But every time he considered recording it, he worried that it would destroy his carefully built mainstream appeal. I loved the song, but I was scared it would make people think I wasn't a real American rock and roll singer. Ritchie revealed in one of his last interviews, "I thought if I recorded something that Mexican radio stations wouldn't play it and teenagers wouldn't buy it." That September afternoon, Ritchie had finally decided to record a demo of La Bamba, but only for his own satisfaction. He planned to keep it private, never intending to release it commercially. Doris Day had finished her session early and was waiting for her car when she heard the distinctive rhythm and melody coming from the studio where Ritchie was working. "I heard this incredible energy and joy in the music," Doris recalled years later. "It was unlike anything else being played on the radio, and that made it special, not problematic." Curious about the source of such vibrant music, Doris knocked on the studio door and asked if she could listen. "Miss Day just appeared in the doorway," Ritchie remembered. "I couldn't believe that America's sweetheart wanted to hear my music." When Ritchie finished playing La Bamba, Doris's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "That's incredible. What is that song? I've never heard anything like it." Ritchie, embarrassed, tried to downplay the song's significance. "It's just something I wrote based on an old Mexican song. It's probably too ethnic for American radio." What Doris said next would change not only Ritchie's career but the entire landscape of American popular music. "Ritchie, that song isn't too Mexican for America. That song is what America should sound like." Confused by her response, Ritchie asked what she meant. "America is made up of people from everywhere, with traditions from all over the world. Your song captures that reality better than anything I've heard. It's not foreign, it's authentically American because it represents the American experience of blending cultures." Doris sat down next to the young musician and shared wisdom that would guide his final months in the music industry. "Ritchie, I've been in this business for 15 years, and I've seen too many talented performers try to hide who they really are to fit into what they think audiences want. But audiences don't want fake, they want real. Your Mexican heritage isn't something to overcome," she continued. "It's something that makes your music special and unique. La Bamba has energy and joy that comes from authentic cultural roots. That's not a weakness, that's your strength." What Doris said next became the guidance that convinced Ritchie to embrace his heritage instead of hiding from it. American teenagers are hungry for music that feels genuine and exciting. They're tired of songs that all sound the same. La Bamba sounds like nothing else on the radio, and that's exactly why it will be a hit. But Ritchie was still hesitant. "Miss Day, what if people think I'm trying to force Mexican culture on American kids?" Doris's response revealed her progressive understanding of American culture and her belief in the power of music to bring people together. "Ritchie, music isn't about forcing anything on anyone. Music is about sharing joy, energy, and the things that make us human. Your song shares the joy of Mexican culture with people who might never experience it otherwise. That's not cultural invasion. That's cultural celebration." And Doris continued with the conviction that would prove prophetic: "Great songs transcend cultural boundaries. If La Bamba is as good as I think it is, people will love it regardless of its origins, because great music speaks to something universal in the human experience." The conversation continued for another hour, with Doris encouraging Ritchie to record La Bamba professionally and to promote it with the same energy he brought to his other hits. "Miss Day convinced me that hiding my heritage was actually betraying my audience," Ritchie reflected. "She helped me understand that people would respect authenticity more than they would reward assimilation." The impact of their conversation was immediate. The next week, Ritchie recorded La Bamba with full production, embracing the song's Mexican roots while giving it the rock and roll energy that made it accessible to teenage audiences across America. Ritchie's performance of La Bamba was fearless and joyful, recalled session musician Carol Kay. You could hear his pride in his heritage coming through the music. When La Bamba was released in October 1958, it became exactly what Doris had predicted: a crossover hit that proved American audiences were ready for music that celebrated cultural diversity. The song climbed the charts faster than anything Ritchie had recorded. Noted music journalist Ralph J. Gleason, "It reached audiences that had never heard traditional Mexican music and made them fall in love with it. But more importantly, La Bamba opened doors for other ethnic performers who had been hiding their cultural backgrounds." Ritchie's success with La Bamba proved that American popular music could embrace sounds from all over the world, explained ethnomusicologist Stephen Loza. "It paved the way for later Latin rock and showed record companies that diversity was commercially viable." Tragically, Ritchie Valens died in a plane crash on February 3, 1959, just 4 months after La Bamba had made him a star. But his brief career had already changed American music forever. If Ritchie hadn't recorded La Bamba, we might have lost one of the most important songs in rock and roll history, observed Rock and Roll Hall of Fame curator Jim Henke. That song became his lasting legacy and proof that cultural authenticity creates timeless art. In the decades that followed, La Bamba became more than just a hit song. It became a symbol of cultural pride and the power of heritage to enrich American popular culture. The song was covered by artists of all backgrounds, featured in countless films and commercials, and became an anthem for Mexican-American pride and cultural celebration. La Bamba proved that America is big enough and generous enough to embrace music from all traditions, noted cultural critic Dave Marsh. Ritchie's courage to record that song helped expand what American music could be. When the biographical film La Bamba was released in 1987, it introduced Ritchie's story to new generations and reinforced the importance of cultural authenticity in artistic expression. The movie showed how Ritchie struggled with his identity and how that struggle produced some of the most important music of the 1950s, explained film historian David Thompson. Doris Day, when asked about her role in encouraging Ritchie to record La Bamba, always emphasized that the courage had come from within him. "I just reminded Ritchie of what he already knew in his heart, that his heritage was something to celebrate, not hide," Doris reflected. "The song was already perfect. He just needed to believe that America was ready for that kind of perfection." Ritchie taught America that Mexican culture could be part of rock and roll could be part of Mexican culture. That integration enriched both traditions. September 12, 1958. A teenage musician was about to hide one of the greatest songs ever written because he feared it was too authentically Mexican for American audiences. One conversation with a legend who understood the power of cultural authenticity convinced him to embrace his heritage and create a song that would outlive both of them. Ritchie Valens learned that day that the things that make you different aren't obstacles to success. They're the foundations of lasting artistic achievement. That audiences hunger for authenticity more than they hunger for assimilation. and that the courage to be yourself completely is what transforms good performers into legends. Doris Day proved that great artists support other artists by encouraging them to be brave enough to share their complete selves with the world, even when being complete feels risky. La Bamba became Ritchie Valens' greatest gift to American culture because someone convinced him that America deserved to receive that gift, and that Mexican heritage was something that would enrich rather than diminish his contribution to rock and roll. Some songs entertain, others educate. The greatest songs do both while celebrating the cultural diversity that makes America's music the most vibrant and inclusive in the world. La Bamba did all of that because a frightened teenager found the courage to share his heritage with audiences who turned out to be ready, willing, and eager to embrace music that sounded like nothing they had heard before but felt like everything they had been waiting to hear. The conversation that saved La Bamba proved that sometimes the most important thing an established artist can do for a young one is convince them that their differences aren't weaknesses to overcome, but strengths to celebrate. Doris Day gave Ritchie Valens the confidence to give America one of its greatest songs. Ritchie Valens gave America a new understanding of what American music could sound like when it embraces rather than excludes the traditions that immigrants bring to the cultural conversation. September 12, 1958. The day fear almost silenced one of the most joyful songs ever written, and wisdom ensured that joy would ring out forever instead. La Bamba became eternal because Ritchie Valens found the courage to let it be Mexican and American simultaneously, proving that the best art happens when cultural boundaries dissolve into something bigger and more beautiful than any single tradition could create alone. That's what Doris Day helped Ritchie understand, that authenticity isn't about choosing between your heritage and your ambitions. It's about using your heritage to achieve ambitions that honor both who you are and who you're becoming. Ritchie Valens became a legend because he learned to love his culture enough to share it fearlessly with people who learned to love it too. La Bamba became immortal because it proved that music speaks languages everyone can understand, regardless of the language in which it's sung. The song that almost never happened because it seemed too Mexican became the song that could never be forgotten, because it was exactly Mexican enough to teach America something new about itself and its capacity to embrace the beautiful differences that make its music the richest and most diverse in the world.